The AIM-7 Sparrow is one of the most iconic missiles in aviation history, a weapon that not only shaped the outcome of several conflicts but also paved the way for the development of modern beyond-visual-range air combat systems. Born during the early years of the Cold War, the Sparrow represented the United States' attempt to move from traditional gun-based dogfighting to radar-guided missile warfare. Over the decades, it went through countless upgrades, was fitted on a wide range of American and Allied fighter jets, and became a crucial part of the aerial arsenal that defended Western air superiority during the second half of the 20th century. Even though it has largely been replaced today by more advanced systems like the AIM-120 AMRAAM, the Sparrow's legacy remains unmatched in terms of influence and development history. The story of the AIM-7 Sparrow begins in the late 1940s and early 1950s, when the U.S. Navy sought a missile that could allow fighter pilots to destroy enemy aircraft without engaging in close-range gunfights. Jet engines were becoming more powerful, speeds were increasing rapidly, and aerial combat was moving into a new era where human reflexes were often not enough to keep up. The Navy contracted companies such as Sperry and Raytheon to work on guided missile projects, and from this effort came the Sparrow family. The earliest Sparrow I missiles were relatively simple beam-riding weapons, but they lacked effectiveness. It wasn't until the introduction of semi-active radar guidance in later versions that the missile truly became a practical weapon. The principle of semi-active radar guidance meant that the launching aircraft had to lock its radar onto the target, and the missile would then follow the reflected radar energy bouncing off the enemy plane. This system allowed for engagements beyond visual range, but it also came with limitations. The firing aircraft had to keep tracking the target until impact, which meant pilots were restricted in their maneuvering after launch. Nonetheless, in the 1950s and 1960s, this was a massive leap forward compared to unguided rockets or guns. The AIM-7 Sparrow gained widespread deployment with the introduction of the F-4 Phantom II, a workhorse fighter bomber of the U.S. Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps. During the Vietnam War, the Sparrow was carried in large numbers by American aircraft. However, early combat results were disappointing. The missile's reliability was questionable, with many failing to hit their targets due to mechanical issues, poor electronics, or challenging engagement conditions. At that time, rules of engagement often forced pilots to visually identify enemy aircraft before firing, negating some of the Sparrow's beyond visual range advantage. Moreover, the radar technology of the 1960s was still developing, and jamming by enemy MiGs sometimes rendered the missile less effective. As a result, kill ratios for early Sparrow variants were much lower than anticipated. Despite these early shortcomings, the AIM-7 underwent a steady process of improvement. By the late 1970s and 1980s, newer variants such as the AIM-7F and AIM-7M featured solid-state electronics, improved guidance systems, and more powerful rocket motors. These improvements dramatically increased the Sparrow's effectiveness. In particular, the AIM-7M became the standard medium-range missile for U.S. fighters like the F-15 Eagle and the F/A-18 Hornet. With these upgraded versions, the Sparrow proved its worth in conflicts such as the Gulf War of 1991, where it achieved a much higher success rate. During Operation Desert Storm, American F-15 pilots used AIM-7M Sparrows to shoot down numerous Iraqi aircraft, demonstrating the missile's maturity and reliability after decades of refinement. The Sparrow's physical characteristics were fairly consistent throughout its service life. Measuring about 12 feet in length and weighing around 500 pounds, it carried a high explosive fragmentation warhead of approximately 88 pounds. Its propulsion system enabled it to reach speeds of around Mach 4, giving it the ability to quickly close distance with enemy targets. The missile's effective range varied by variant, generally falling between 20 and 30 miles, which was considered impressive during its heyday. Its cylindrical body and clipped delta wings made it instantly recognizable when mounted beneath the wings or fuselages of American fighter jets. One of the key roles the Sparrow played was in shaping U.S. and NATO air combat doctrine. For much of the Cold War, Western fighter pilots trained to engage Soviet aircraft using radar-guided Sparrows at medium ranges, followed by heat-seeking sidewinders at close range. This dual-weapon strategy gave American pilots flexibility in battle. The Sparrow's presence also forced adversaries to adopt countermeasures such as radar jamming, electronic warfare, and evasive maneuvers, all of which contributed to the constant technological arms race between NATO and Warsaw Pact air forces. Beyond its air-to-air role, the Sparrow also found life as a naval surface-to-air missile. Modified into the AIM-7 Sparrow, it was deployed on U.S. Navy and Allied warships to defend against enemy aircraft and anti-ship missiles. The Sea Sparrow became an integral part of naval defense systems, used by NATO fleets worldwide. This adaptation extended the Sparrow's service life and utility far beyond the fighter aircraft role for which it was originally designed. To this day, upgraded versions of the Sea Sparrow continue to serve in various navies, proving the adaptability and enduring relevance of the missile's core design. The AIM-7 also had a significant export history. Allied nations such as Japan, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, and many NATO members integrated the Sparrow into their fighter fleets. It became one of the most widely used medium-range missiles in the world, ensuring commonality among Allied air forces. This interoperability was critical during multinational operations, where U.S. and Allied pilots could rely on the same missile technology during joint missions. Eventually, however, technology advanced beyond what the Sparrow could offer. Its reliance on semi-active radar guidance was increasingly seen as a limitation. Pilots had to maintain radar lock until impact, which exposed them to enemy fire and restricted maneuvering. What the U.S. military needed was a true fire-and-forget missile that could engage targets independently once launched. This led to the development of the AIM-120 AMRAAM, introduced in the 1990s. The AMRAAM quickly replaced the Sparrow as the standard medium-range missile of U.S. and Allied air forces, offering active radar guidance, greater range, and superior kill probabilities. By the early 2000s, the Sparrow was largely retired from frontline U.S. service, though it continued to be used by some allies and as a naval defense weapon. Despite being overshadowed by newer technology, the Sparrow's importance cannot be overstated. It was the first widely deployed radar-guided missile of its kind, and its long service life, spanning nearly 5 decades, speaks to its effectiveness and adaptability. It bridged the gap between the early, unreliable missile experiments of the 1950s and the advanced, highly lethal weapons of today. For many pilots, particularly those who flew the F-4 Phantom and F-15 Eagle, the Sparrow was a familiar and trusted companion in combat. The AIM-7 Sparrow's legacy lives on not only in its direct descendants like the AMRAAM but also in the broader lessons it taught about missile design, radar integration, and air combat doctrine. It demonstrated the challenges of introducing new technology, the necessity of iterative improvements, and the reality that no weapon system is perfect from the start. From its humble beginnings as an unreliable missile in Vietnam to its refined performance in Desert Storm, the Sparrow embodies the evolution of modern aerial warfare. Even today, when advanced stealth fighters like the F-35 carry AMRAAMs and hypersonic missiles are under development, the story of the AIM-7 Sparrow remains a cornerstone in the history of air combat. It was the missile that taught generations of engineers, tacticians, and pilots how to fight and win in the complex world of radar-guided warfare. The Sparrow may no longer be America's primary air-to-air missile, but its influence continues to echo in the skies.